hope so. I hope so. I mean, we have to figure it out where it is. Give him a minute. Give him 1 minute. We lost Mike. He took off. I wonder if I should, well. I was waiting, Mike just walked out. I was seeing if he was gonna walk back in real quick. He was, I'll get Stephen to.
Do you know how many members are on that committee?
I think there were.
I met this one girl there, the one in front there. And
Okay. I think we're going to start. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this regular board meeting of the Truckee-Donner PUD. It is, by my clock, 6:02 on Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. If I could get a roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Aguirre?
here,
Director Harris?
Here.
Director Laliotis?
Here.
President Finn?
Here.
The record will note Vice President Bender's absent.
Thank you, Shauna. And time for the pledge. As you are willing and able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Harris, would you like to lead us this evening? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Brian, do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
There are no changes.
I'm not sure that you're on.
There are no changes this evening.
Thank you. Which brings us to public comment. This is time that we set aside for the public to address the board on any matter that is not on the agenda. Testimony related to any agendized matter will be addressed at the time that that agenda item is considered. Do we have public comment tonight? I know that we do. So we have one public comment that is in response to the committee's presentation that they're going to give that we will address at that time. And we have comment that we're not going to read tonight because we are still we have evolving standards on our public comment and when we read and when we don't. So when we meet in person, it is going to be our policy to, you're here in person and you give us your public comment. If you have a written comment that you would like us to read, we would like you to specify that you want it to be read out loud and include your name on that comment item. Otherwise, the comment will be disseminated to the board and we will post it with the other public comments on our website. So that is our policies moving forward. So that's where we are this evening.
No further public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Which brings us to our director updates. We'll start there and move forward. Any update from Director Harris? Says no. Any director update from Director Laliotis? Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here. No further updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Director.
and the only thing I forgot is, I'm glad that we're meeting.
We're-
I
As am I. As am I.
know.
It is, which leaves me, and tonight I was in fact moved to put together a comment. First of all, I would just like to acknowledge that we are all living through some extraordinary times together here, and we have been sort of battered by a global pandemic, by drought, by climate change, by fire, by the evil of war, and it can be too much sometimes. And I find that when I am being sort of flattened by the world at large, that I can regain my footing by focusing my hands and my heart at a purpose here close to home. And that's what every single person in this room tonight is doing. You are showing up for us, and everybody who's watching right now as well. And I am just very humble and grateful that you all are helping to forward the vital work of this district. And we are working. We're working to make our water and our electrical delivery systems even more safe and reliable and robust and secure. We're doing this by identifying funding and executing projects like our upcoming pipeline replacement project this summer and our Truckee substation improvements that we just completed last fall. We are continuing to work on decarbonizing our energy portfolio. We have made amazing progress in this realm, and we have every intention of continuing that progress. And I would like to thank Mr. Horvath so much for his work. And we are going to do all that we can to help our town reach its renewable energy goals. In the meantime, we continue to expand and improve our energy and water efficiency programs. We offer rebates for upgrading your electrical panel, for switching to electrical appliances in your laundry and in your kitchen, for replacing your hot water heater, your heat pumps, installing EV charging stations. Technology is changing fast and for the better, and I just want to thank Mr. Poncelet and Mr. Keats so much for their focus in these areas. We continue to work to become more transparent and responsive to our customers. For example, by implementing a dedicated PUD nixle so that we can communicate quickly during an outage or other urgent situations. We are also improving and upgrading our website and continuing to migrate documents and financials into our Laserfish system so that people can access them quickly and easily. I just want to thank Mr. Salmon and Ms. Kohlmeyer for their work in these subjects, and to the board for putting your energy and your ideas and your creativity into our strategic plan, which is providing us with the framework to create and evaluate and forward our goals. And thank you, General Manager Wright, for keeping us accountable and on schedule, and Ms. Stewart for her role in helping us to create an exceptional place to work. So it's hard to be down when you're surrounded by so much passion and dedication and skill, and I mean that at every level of this district. All of the men and the women who climb the poles and dig the holes and answer the phones and draw up the plans. I'm just really proud of this team and this district. To quote Mr. Biden, our president, last night, we are better now than we were a year ago, and we're going to be better a year from now. And just, we are going to continue to accomplish great things, and I thank you so much for your service. That's my comment this evening. Thank you. Which brings us to the general manager update.
Good, thank you, President Finn. I will try to go quickly. We have a great presentation this evening with our broadband committee. Want to start off first by thanking you all for joining us this evening and all the hard work you've done this far. We're very excited at what you have to present this evening. You've covered some of the items that were in the update, but I'll try to put a little bit more detail to them as we can. So we talked with the adoption of the strategic plan last spring. We talked about, as an organization, through our board process, presenting updates through our Monday.com app that we use as an organization for internal project planning and updates, but also for the board in terms of strategic planning. So last time we presented this at the beginning of the year, where we were with the 22-23 budget development. And now we're working on diligently on a few of the board's strategic initiatives for 2022. This evening's broadband committee will be material, accomplishments on some of that, one of those initiatives. So I'm going to kind of go over these quickly of where we're at, and if there's any questions along the way, please feel free to interject or raise your hand, and we'll be able to answer them. So obviously, this one here is going to be covered in great detail this evening, so I won't spend too much attention on it, but we're excited about what comes out of the workshop later this evening on guidance for staff and the committee on next steps. So that one I will gloss over real quickly. The next initiative is our undergrounding initiative. We've been pausing on this one to some degree because there is, while it's not a direct relationship, there is a relationship in terms of what the district, how we decide to pursue broadband has a relationship on how we integrate undergrounding. And so because there is a potential for fiber assets to be installed both overhead and underground. Once we have a better idea of how we're going to pursue community broadband based on the board's guidance, staff will be bringing some preliminary steps in developing this initiative for underground and what that means for us in the coming years. So for that one, not much to update in terms of progress, but it's waiting kind of in the wings as one of our next initiatives to address. 100% renewable energy and local generation. The last board meeting, we had a workshop that was addressing the topic of moving the needle. And we talked about, as an organization, what next steps are we going to take on in terms of renewable energy, local resiliency, reliability, and GHG reduction. And so staff got some great guidance and feedback from the board at the last board meeting. We will be updating these initiatives. It has taken kind of the natural path of combining several initiatives together in terms of local generation, our renewable energy portfolio, and how we continue to develop local reliability and resiliency for the utility. A couple of projects of note, we are participating. President Finn has been appointed as a member of our board to sit on the Carbon Zero Truckee Tahoe Alliance. That name is, I believe, still evolving, but it is essentially a local collaborative between, at this time, the Truckee Downer PUD, the airport, the town of Truckee, and we're looking for expansion of that into this other local public agencies. Some real good strategic planning in process at this time on what projects are be available for reducing the carbon footprint of all of our organizations here locally and regionally. We had a workshop at the last board meeting. My apologies here. Let me open this up. We talked about green rate opportunities. We've had a couple of workshops on the green rate cost of service assessment. The last workshop talked about moving the needle in terms of greenhouse gas reduction and our renewable portfolio. Staff took the feedback. We're going to present here in the next board meetings a couple of projects for board consideration and approval and begin making measurable progress here in 2022 in the district's greenhouse gas reductions. Some of those projects currently underway is our inventory. We're going to be working collaboratively through the local CZTT on both the district's individual greenhouse gas inventory, but also a regional inventory. So that's in partnership with the town of Truckee and the airport. And then looking for more collaboration and participation with other agencies as well. This is going to be an integral process in the district's water utility, really having an assessment and inventory of the greenhouse gas footprint of our water production and delivery facilities and how we can move forward in reducing that footprint over time. We're also working on an updated fleet master plan. This comes out of, if you recall, the previous board meeting with CMUA had some review of the California Advanced Clean Fleet Initiative through the California Air Resources Board. The district has an opportunity here to, one, be proactive and in front of that initiative, but also prepare and update our long-term fleet master plan. And this will be geared towards opportunities for greenhouse gas reduction and service reliability here in our local community. then finally, the final initiative is local generation. Staff has been working with the town of Truckee, the airport, and the Fire Protection District. It doesn't directly involve the PUD's, involvement or investment at this point, but there's a consideration for a local biomass facility that's currently on a scoping phase, a scoping study of that. The district has been participating in order to support that effort and make sure that where it is appropriate and beneficial to the community, we do participate. Once there is something more tangible to present to the board, we will bring that before the board for consideration. At this point, there's a whole range of possibilities there in terms of size of the facility, district's involvement, and the overall benefit. So that's where we are with our board initiatives. Happy to answer any questions you might have on any of these and bring back more in detail at a later date. The next update wanted to provide is something we as an entire staff are excited to present. We recently engaged with Probolsky Research on this is the firm we use for our community outreach survey back in 2020 and early 2021. We recently engaged with Probolsky again to help us conduct an employee survey and would like to present this evening a high-level overview of the results of that survey. So I'm going to go through a couple of slides. These are basically representative results on the survey questions and staff input. So the first question here is agree or disagree, satisfied with the current job at the Truckee-Donner Public Utility District. As you can see, 87.3% of the staff are satisfied with their current job with the PUD. 86% agree they are part of something meaningful. This is a very linear relationship with what our community survey was in terms of the community's perception of the district as their importance in the and meaningfulness of the quality of life here at in the Truckee area. 76% agree they feel valued as an employee. This is a great positive feedback. It also presents staff and across all levels for us to address the 23% here that are uncertain or disagree with that statement. And so these types of surveys serve as a baseline for us on opportunities for us to improve that survey results. And I'm going to touch on a couple of themes here at the end of this that are really powerful to us as a team and things we can work on. 73% agree they feel appreciated for their work. 53% agree they feel like they know where we are going as an organization. And this one resonated with me. And so this is something our team, our leadership team, our middle management team, and our staff together, clearly there's a need for improvement, not just in communication, and we'll see some more questions that address that. Communication is a tricky topic. We can communicate, but are we communicating the right information and answering the questions that are needed? And more importantly here, from an organization, it's important that we all have an understanding of where we are going strategically moving forward. So I take this as an indication for our staff and team to further engage all of the organization in our strategic plan and make sure they understand their value and involvement in that. This is a great indicator. 86 agree they have job security with the PUD. This is important for everyone in their employment to have that comfort level. In particular with the current dynamics of the job market out there with COVID and economic pressures out there. 69% agree they have opportunities for growth and promotions. This is actually a very positive statistic, especially in an organization our size, 72 plus or minus, 6 or 8 employees at a given time, 72 employees, 80 employees, that almost 70% of them feel they have growth opportunities is really important, because in an organization our size, there aren't always opportunities for promotion or development until someone retires or moves on. And so this is, the staff is working diligently to find opportunities for professional growth that may not mean promotions or changing in positions, but expanding roles and increasing value to the community and the organization. 78% agree that PUD supports work-life balance of their employees. This has been a really tricky one over the last 2 years with the COVID. Work-life balance for someone who, has complete autonomy would be very challenging with, activities being closed or restrictions. So it was really important to us during the COVID pandemic that we provided opportunities for not just recreational work-life balance, but work-life balance in terms of managing family matters during the COVID or health issues and things of that nature. So this is an important statistic. There's opportunity for improvement, but it's definitely, nonetheless, 78% is a great statistic. 76% agree they have the resources that they need to do their job well. Anyone who's in the workforce understands this is an important quality or characteristic of employment in terms of providing the authority and resources to do your job at a high level really improves your work-life quality there. And so definitely opportunities for improvement, but very happy to see that very positive results in this particular survey question. Proper communication. This one, communication pops up a lot, quite frequently in workplace culture, any kind of employee survey, and improvements. And so it's not lost on anyone on our team or across the organization that communication is a never-ending effort. It's a continuous effort. It's an evolving effort, and it requires a lot of energy, pardon the pun. But it's something we continue to strive to improve. We're excited on a couple of opportunities to develop programs that increase the upward communication. So it's not just leadership communicating out updates, but 360 engagement across the organization. This one's really important from a safety perspective. Very, very positive results that staff are receiving the appropriate training to fulfill their job responsibilities, especially consideration of the type of work we do. This is a critical component of safety and efficiency here at the district. Creative ideas. I think this is something that is a commonality or a common thread across utilities. I know in California and perhaps the entire U.S. that breaking the mold of the old rigid kind of conformity of public process and that very black and white rigid engineering perspective or approach to doing our job as a public utility. Encouraging creative ideas, out-of-the-box thinking is important for us, and we look to increase this 75% over the next year. %71% agree the culture is caring and supportive. This is one of, probably a summary statement of our core values collectively. Definitely an opportunity to improve, but it's 71% is a good stat there in terms of how the staff perceives the district as a caring and supportive agency. 76% agree their ideas are valued by their supervisor. This is a good one for communication, with definitely making the effort for communication. Now the task is ensuring that what we're communicating and the information we're conveying is valued and on a high priority. But 81% here is a good stat that both the supervisors, managers, and staff are continually providing feedback to each other. This is a counterintuitive statement, but it's 78% disagree. And so we kind of flipped the stat here. I'll talk to Probolski about that one. 78% disagree. They do not find themselves bypassing people to get their job done. That's important, that there's open and organized communication across the district. Here's one that goes back to communication. 56% agree they receive information about changes or important happenings in a timely manner and effective manner. This is simply getting out in front of activities, plans, projects, strategies, and getting out in front of the organization to ensure that everyone is a part of that process. I was actually pleasantly surprised on this one, not that I don't participate in effective meetings, but I was glad to hear that across the organization, people feel meetings are effective. Effective meetings, is a topic that they hold entire courses on, and so that the fact that across the organization, people are perceiving these as effective and productive is very pleasing to see. Safety is our number one core value. And we had a lot of feedback from staff that be placed at the top of the list. The board and the team made those modifications, put safety first, and clearly the district across the organization recognizes that, sees it, and feels it. General positivity and the morale for the departments. This is a good positive statistic, but definitely opportunities for improvement. And then quickly here, what the staff values. 42% say communication and safety are the core values that mean the most to them. We saw that in the development of those values during the early strategic planning process. Here's one that we need to, as an organization, continue to build on. And so what's notable here is that there's almost a 31% that are unsure. I personally interpret the unsure as a statistic indicating that we're not communicating this enough or effectively and not demonstrating it enough. So we've had some discussions already as a team, and we're going to work with middle management and staff across the organization on how we ensure that the core values are not just spoken on, but demonstrated through our behavior and activities. And then quickly, what are most valued as benefits. We had this discussion during the UNREP negotiations and during the IBEW negotiations that benefits, we're talking about medical benefits and other wellness benefits, as well as work-life balance. This is reflective of the characteristic of our staff. There's active and engaged in a lot of different activities, and the benefits and work-life balances are important. I think it's a common trend across different industries that finding other values beyond just compensation, but actual work-life balance and wellness are important for everyone. And finally, this is one that I'm taking personally to heart, that 16% unsure, 27% know that they're aware of the strategic plans and goals of the PUD. We have a published strategic planning document. It's important that every employee of this district has an understanding of what the strategic plans are and what their role is in each of those. And so that is a motivator for myself personally when we bring this back to the board with the next survey, that we see a transition here. Some other data about the job market. Again, a little bit reversed on how the question was phrased. In terms of succession planning, a good kind of vertical version of the bell curve, but 11 to 20 years seems to be that middle grouping there with the district and their staff. That's important for us to know in terms of long-term planning. We have experienced in the past waves of retirements, and it looks like in terms of strategic planning, we need to prepare for that again in about that 8 to 12, 15-year mark for another wave of retirements. Communication styles, preferences. Clearly, one-on-one, face-to-face meetings are the most preferred with emails being a close second. And then that's it. And I took a lot of time there, so that's the end of the GM updates. I wanted the opportunity for the board to see this baseline survey of where our staff is now. And as we continue to work through the strategic plan and all of the challenges out there in the workplace, we'll have additional surveys in the future for the board to kind of review and give any feedback on.
Thank you, Brian, very much for implementing the survey and then presenting us with the results. I think it gave us things to think about moving forward. I know personally, communication is a nonstop challenge. Thank you. Which brings us to the consent calendar this evening. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar?
No, Madam President.
Thank you. Does anybody, board members, have anything that they would like to pull or questions on the consent calendar? I see a nose. Okay, everybody's good?
General manager.
It was.
Report, Brian.
It was. Thank you. So do we have a motion about accepting the consent?
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Director Harris.
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
The record will note that Vice President Bender is absent.
Okay, which brings us to the next item, which my iPad is deciding that I'm not going to get to see. So I'm going to do it in a different mode. And give me just a second. I'll get back to my agenda. There we go. Action item number 12, consideration for approval of the 2022 salary schedule and benefits package for the unrepresented employees and approval of new positions. So we are going to receive and direct staff to file, hopefully, the 2021 Coffin Associates compensation study, approve the 2022 unrepresented and salary schedule as presented, and approve revisions to District Code Title 4, Section 407090, administrative leave as presented. So, take it away.
Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. Thank you for having me this evening. I will be presenting, as you mentioned, on the 2022 salary schedule and benefits package for unrepresented employees. Before we get started, I wanted to mention that in your staff report, there's summary data on the compensation plan, kind of for easy review. But I've also included the full report in printed copy for you and your reading pleasure, because there's a lot there. I will start with a brief background and timeline of events that has led us here tonight for discussion. As per district code, it is the responsibility of the general manager to maintain a compensation plan for all classes of positions. The plan shall establish a salary range or rate of pay showing a minimum and maximum rates for each class. The general manager shall submit the compensation plan to the board of directors for approval. The district has historically had two salary schedules, one for represented employees by IBEW 1245 and unrepresented exempt employees, which include management and technical positions. In March 2020, the board approved salary schedules for both unrepresented and represented staff. The unrepresented staff's terms and conditions are listed on the slide. So those include, for 2020, included a 2.5% salary schedule adjustment and a 5% general wage increase. In 2021, included a general wage increase based upon October annual changes for the CPIW, with a 5% maximum and a 2% minimum. And then also for a compensation study to be performed in 2021. So in January 2021, the unrepresented group received a 2% wage adjustment based on these conditions. And as agreed upon in March 2020 terms and conditions, we completed a compensation study for the unrepresented positions in 2021. In July 2021, we began the compensation study process with Coffin Associates. The summary results of the study, as I mentioned, are included as attachment 1. And you also have the printed copy of the full report. During our review of the study with our staff and the board of directors during the negotiation process, the district has identified several challenges in establishing clear parameters for competitive employment markets and comparable job classifications with similar agencies to accurately and effectively establish competitive salary ranges for many of the unrepresented employment classifications within the district. Other challenges that we saw while reviewing the study and complicated the process was that with the recent job market instability generated by the impacts of COVID-19 to both the economy with inflation and managing new workplace challenges such as the Great Resignation and changing expectations of employees. To remedy this, the district will undertake a more comprehensive compensation plan update to include steps that are listed on the PowerPoint. So those steps are to review job classifications and descriptions, establish board-adopted policy for competitive salary metrics, identify employer market profile for future compensation studies, a healthcare benefits market analysis, a retirement benefits program review, and propose updated compensation and benefits maintenance plan. Taking these steps to update the compensation plan will further refine the process in the future by more accurately defining the district's competitive employment markets, enhance our ability to effectively recruit and retain highly skilled employees, and establish a policy maintaining consistency and transparency. This moves us on to the negotiation process for the terms and conditions for unrepresented employees. At the January 5th, 2022 meeting, the Board of Directors designated General Manager Brian Wright as the district's labor negotiator for negotiations with the unrepresented exempt employee group. The General Manager and unrepresented staff held several negotiation discussions. During these meetings, the group considered local and regional economic data, competitive employment opportunities and markets, and recent changes in the public water and electric utility sector. Following these discussions and negotiations, staff have arrived at the following proposal for adjustments in 2022. These terms and conditions will be effective back to January 1, 2022. A 5% general wage increase based on October CPIW, which was 5.2%, and in alignment with our IBEW Local 1245 represented employees who received an approved wage adjustment of 5% on January 5th. And also an increase in administrative days from 9 days to 10 days. In addition to the terms and conditions mentioned in the previous slides, 8 new positions were included for consideration and approval during the budget process. At that time of approval, staff informed the board that once these new positions were fully developed, we'd have an opportunity to review the role and salary classifications for each of those positions during the approval process for the 2022 salary schedule adjustments. So tonight for the board's review, we have these positions that will be included in the unrepresented salary schedule. 3 represented positions are still in review with the union and will be presented once that process has been completed. So the first position that we would like to go over with you that is being added to the unrepresented salary schedule includes one near and dear to my heart, Human Resources and Risk Management Director. This position has recently been classified as a manager-level position and is being reclassified to a director-level position in order to facilitate the appropriate autonomy for various human resource and risk compliance requirements and report directly to the general manager. The second position is a General Services Manager. This position will report directly to the CFO and will be charged with the responsibility of leading and managing the district's general services departments, which include facility maintenance, utility fleet, and warehouse. Senior Electric Engineer. This position will report directly to Electric Engineering Manager and is responsible for assisting in development, design, and execution for a wide range of electric utility operational and capital improvement plan and engineering projects. This is also an exciting opportunity as it serves as a personnel development and professional growth opportunity within the district's electric utility succession planning. Communications Specialist. This position will report directly to our PIO and Strategic Affairs Director and will be tasked with development, implementation, and management of the district's external and internal communication platforms, including customer relations, websites, social media, education, etc. Risk and Compliance Specialist. This reports directly to the HR and Risk Management Director and is responsible in assisting in the development, implementation, and management of the district's various risk and safety programs and organizational compliance initiatives. There is a sixth one on there that is not actually a new position. It was actually approved by the board a few years back. However, during various transitions, the position has remained vacant and was not on the 2021 salary schedule. We are now ready to move forward with hiring that position again, so I've added it to the salary schedule for approval, and we wanted to highlight this in the presentation for the board. On this slide, you have the breakdown of the fiscal impact. So for the 2022 budget, it included a 4.5% increase and also a $83,000 compensation study contingency. This additional cost, and then there's an additional cost of the administration days that equals close to $22,000 with the applicable burdens that come with that, such as payroll taxes, workers' comp, et cetera. The $83,000 contingency for the compensation study more than covers the variance to the budget. This slide highlights the remaining balance of that compensation study contingency after covering both the 5% increase and the additional admin day. So the remaining balance of that the compensation study contingency would be around $42,000. So our recommendation for the board tonight is to receive and direct staff to file the 2021 Coffin Associates compensation study, approve the 2022 unrepresented salary schedule as presented, and approve revisions to the district code, Title IV, Section 4.07.090, administrative leave as presented. And thank you, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stewart, for giving us a lot of information clearly and succinctly. We really appreciate it. Is there any public comment on this action item?
No, Madam President.
Thank you. I will now open it up to the board's questions, comments, discussion. Well, let's see, I'm going to start in my direction and work down. Director Aguirre, that means you get to go first if you have any questions or comments.
Oh, I'm first. I thought you said you were first.
I'm skipping myself, I'm sorry.
No, I think that Brian and his these Coffin Associates have done good to bring our people up to date, and it dates back to January 1st. And so I think this is about time.
Thank you, Director Aguirre. Director Laliotis, do you have any questions or comments for us this evening?
Sure, a couple of questions. So in the fiscal impact, the new positions that you discussed, those are already included in the budget.
Correct.
So the fiscal impact is just what, 5% plus the administrative day.
Correct.
Director Laliotis, I don't believe your microphone is on.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Did everyone hear what I said? Great. Then just comment on the Coffin Associates compensation study. As a board member, I want to acknowledge that I appreciate the word challenges. I think the study does point out some challenges that we have based on our current distribution of staff and salaries. So I support the idea that we are going to move forward with a more comprehensive study. And I'm not sure how, but I think this board needs to be, at least me as a board member, would like to be maybe a little bit more involved in understanding what we are going to get out of the study. And to be clear, for me at least, that I feel like there are challenges in here and we need to really wring those challenges out and understand why they exist and then a plan to move forward. And I do think it's a good idea to work with the board as well as staff and as well as, compensation specialists who do these studies for a living to understand what types of policies exist that boards adopt to set standards, because I know that they're probably across the board. But I support that notion that we as a board need that to establish consistency and finding a level playing field where we feel like we have the tools to make the financial decisions that we are charged with making. So, I would, as we seek proposals for this study, I think it may be beneficial to bring those, in front of the board for a little bit of discussion, just so we're all on the same page about what we're anticipating and what we're asking for. Other than that, one question, the IBEW contract, are we using the same month CPI as, okay. That was my only other question, so that's all I have.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. Director Harris?
Yes, thank you. And I know this is a lot of work, so I definitely feel everything that went into it, because I know it's kind of blood, sweat, and tears to make employees happy through their salaries and everything. And as I look at the Coffin Associates study, one thing that kind of stuck out at me is that, and I'm just looking at the straight monthly salary data and not the compensation, the total compensation package, because compensation, we know, comes in various ways, whether it be salary, benefits, education, schooling, and vehicles, or, memberships to gyms or whatever. It's a full compensation package. But this, I was just looking at just the salaries and seeing how far above we are the median of it, because we typically look at the median for salaries. And there are a handful that are above 20%, and that, in my opinion, those are positions that we are paying over market for. And, who knows, why are we not paying everybody that far over market? And, but on the other hand, if we are putting this flat percentage towards the entire salary schedule, the whole schedule gets up. And then on top of that, we also get the overhead in addition to that. And our overhead, I believe, is about 85, 90%. I think Mike can probably do that. So something that, say, is supposed to cost $5,000 really costs about $9,000. That said, was there any plan of how to take into account kind of holding some of these positions until market catches up to them? Or are we just kind of doing a forethought that we're just going to put the money ahead of time and try to be proactive?
I can comment on that. So as Director Laliotis pointed out, the long-term plan, what's before you this evening, is to approve the proposal as presented, based on the negotiations that staff had with myself and that I had with the board in closed session. The proposal, the kind of editorial on this, or the proposal moving forward, is for staff to engage in a comprehensive classification and compensation program, putting it together, which will also include a further study, but working with the board on setting what parameters are we comparing, what type of agencies are we comparing with, what is our market moving forward. So at the current version of our district code, it basically gives the responsibility for the general manager to manage a salary schedule. We periodically negotiate with the unrepresented group to set the district code revisions for some years forward, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. We go through a negotiation process, but each time we go through that negotiation process, there's kind of an unknown of what our targets are, what our market is, and what our parameters are. And so what staff is presenting to the board is based on the negotiation, consider the recommended approvals, and then staff will come back to the board at the end of the year or sometime in the very near future with a proposed compensation plan and maintenance plan for wages moving forward. A couple of things are included there: market survey of our health benefits, a more in-depth and comprehensive study of actual job classifications. One of the weaknesses or challenges in the compensation study in front of you is that the comparative agencies didn't have apples to apples for all the positions. And so whether they're 20% below pay or 20% above pay, they were based on a market portfolio that COF generated that didn't exactly match up with the types of services and responsibilities that our staff have. And so there's a project here for us to make sure that our classifications are in alignment, that make it more effective and accurate in future studies. That's the project that HR and the executive team will work on over the next 9 months. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but in terms of what we're going to do now, kind of with all due respect, we established that through the negotiation process, and we have an opportunity to either approve or deny that. If we want to go back to negotiations, we can do that. That's at the board's pleasure.
Does that answer your question?
I appreciate that, yeah. Another thing, in looking at this, the IT security applications manager, which range was that supposed to be in?
I believe it's M46.
Okay, and then I also saw that the general manager's range snuck in there, as I know you're a contract employee, but then that range expanded out to, it was very different than the previous range that I saw. It jumped up to 22%, where I don't have what it was previously, but it is what it is, so.
So the general manager's wage range was based on, the board established a range during the recruitment in 2020, and so we're continuing to carry that forward. You are correct that the general manager is a contract employee that's negotiated periodically, but CalPERS requires an established range in order for it to be considered a PERSable salary.
Okay. So what kind of guidance were we trying to get from this study?
There was a couple of requests from the board of directors during the last negotiation, was to conduct a salary survey to get a basic data point of where we're at either regionally or in the industry-wide. So that was COF and Associates recommended agency comparatives. We worked diligently with COF on trying to really examine what other opportunities out there would better reflect the electric industry. We can see that the study is very regional and public works or public district centric. And so even the electric utilities that were represented there some were generation utilities, not distribution utilities. They were different sizes, things of that nature. And so at the end of the study, we presented to the board an opportunity to, accept the data or review the data, file the data, and then look for guidance on how we proceed in the out years.
Okay, so then the next salary study, that's where you guys will look at each position and where it's classified into and make the adjustments from that.
Before we conduct another study, you will have an opportunity as a board to work with staff on setting our parameters and what our policy will be moving forward. So we don't have currently an official policy of whether we're going for 75th percentile. We don't have, are we going for electric distribution markets? Are we going for only public agencies? There's a lot of moving parts and very difficult for any consultant to find enough comparative data for an agency that does water and electric as a special district, as a nonprofit, the size we are, et cetera, et cetera. And so we'll be working with the board in establishing those parameters before the next study is executed.
Okay. And I know that the salary surveys, or the salary ranges have been put in front of the board since I've been on the board. And I know at the previous one that I had, I abstained from voting for it because I was concerned about how some of the positions were placed. So I'm just going to kind of share that as a caveat for that, so.
Okay. Is that end your questions or your comments?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Director Harris. And I think that, Director Laliotis, I liked your term of wringing out the challenges. I think that's where we're at. And I think you spelled them out pretty well on your next steps, that we need a review of the job classifications and descriptions, that the board needs to adopt a policy for competitive salary metrics, identify employer market profile for future compensation studies, et cetera. Those are the details that we need to wring out. And I would like to add to Brian's list of things that make it hard for us to pin down an appropriate compensation level is literally where we live. I mean, we live in a strange place as far as expenses go. And I think we really do have to take that into consideration, that I don't think is going to come out in anybody's study. Living in housing in Truckee is just, it's unique. So anyhow, thank you again for all of this information. I feel pretty good about my understanding and where we're at. We have discussed this multiple times in closed session and now in open session again. So I feel confident in moving this forward and calling for, do we have a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Shauna, could we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Director Guerra.
Yes.
Director Harris?
No.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
Thank you, and the record will note that Vice President Bender is absent.
Thank you very much. Which brings us now to action item number 13, the budget performance report, 2021 year end. So hopefully we will be accepting this report for 2021 end of year, which includes significant variances identified since the adoption of the budget for 2020 and 2021. So thank you, Mr. Selman. You're on deck.
Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. Back on. All right. Item 13, budget performance review, second half of 2021. So the 2020 and 2021 budget was adopted on November 6, 2019. District code requires semi-annual review. This is the fourth of 4 reviews for this budget cycle. District code also requires review and description of significant variances, and that is incorporated in this report as well. I always like to do a quick overview of the district from a 30,000-foot level established in 1927, 46 square miles of service territory, and a $48 million annual budget. On the electric side, we have 14,500 customers and about 30 million in revenues. On the water side, 13,500 customers and 15 million in revenues, operating revenues. The capital investment on water is actually larger than the electric side. So for 2021, the operating revenues, this page is the snapshot of a budget on in 8 squares for 2021, the various parts and pieces are summarized here. 29 million in revenues, which were 4.5% over budget. You have purchase power that comes out of that, operating expenses, capital expenditures, investment income, debt service. We have fund transfers that help balance the budget each year, pluses and minuses, and then net cash flow that from a budget perspective is zero, and it shows for the year 1.5 million favorable for electric. And I'm going to go over each of these as quickly as possible. So revenues of 29 million were 1.3 million or 4.5% favorable to budget. A million of that was demand driven. The average billed kWh per day was up 2.7%. And we also had a customer increase closer to 2%, and budget anticipated about a 1% customer growth. So those add up for the reasons for the electric variance in revenues. Purchase power of 13.5 million was 645,000 or 5% over budget. Part of that was the volume of purchase power that was required to meet that demand. And then also the average cost per megawatt hour was up almost 3%. On operating expenses, they were of 12.8 million. They were 1.5 million over budget, or 14% over budget. 1.3 million of that was the storm. Two storms in particular. There was a storm right around Halloween, and then a major storm event, the majority of this variance, which was driven that last week of the year. And that was a costly storm damage. We do budget some storm damage, but not anything like what we experienced. We also had less hours charged to capital projects than was budgeted. And so that creates, from an operating expense, the payroll is either charged to operating expense or to capital projects, depending on what they're working on. And we had a lot less activity in the on the capital project side for various reasons, in particular the pandemic. And so we had more costs charged to the operating side of the ledger. We also had variance position vacancies that added up to $770,000. That's a favorable variance. And then we spent almost $500,000 more in wildfire mitigation costs than budgeted. That was an approved item by the board early in the year. Investment income was significantly below the budget expectations set in 2019 due to the current market environment. Capital expenditures of 3.3 million were 3.2 million, basically half of what was budgeted. And one of the larger items was we had 1.2 million budgeted for the courtyard building, excuse me, 1.2 million for a courtyard building to be constructed in 2021, and that project has been delayed. It's still actively being planned, but we did not incur those expenditures as budgeted. We had less IT budgets. We did do the Truckee substation for about $1 million, but we also had a Martis Valley substation planned in 2019 for 2021 that did not occur. So those kind of offset. And then I believe we had a little over 500,000 planned for remodeling of this building. That is another active project that's been delayed, but those costs were not incurred in 2021. Debt service for electric of $643,000 was right on budget. That's their portion of the side fund pension obligation bonds, which that debt is close to being paid off. Then we have fund transfers that were $500,000 favorable to budget, and that was due to less transfer from capital reserves because we had less capital expenditures. So we did not take out of the capital reserve for the courtyard building as planned because we did not execute on that building. That was the main driver there. We had almost $1 million greater use in facility fees, and that was due to the Truckee substation project that the board is aware of and was discussed a couple meetings ago. Let's see. We also had a couple of non-budgeted transfers, $500,000 to rate reserves based on 2020 results, so that was a 2021 activity. It was approved in April. And then we had a policy change to clean up capital reserve versus operating fund reserve, so we moved from operating reserve $7.4 million from the operating reserve to the capital reserve, because that fund was building up solely due to the lack of expenditures and capital projects. And that money is slated for, as you all know, in the budget that was just approved for 2022, 2023. Key reserve balances for electric, right at $6 million, which is slightly above the goal for operating reserve, which is 50% of operating expenses. The capital reserve, which is an average of annual capital expenditures, is above the goal because we have not been spending in capital reserves, as just mentioned. The vehicle reserve is slightly under, in part due to a large bucket truck purchase in 2021. And the rate reserve is spot on to the goal due to that transfer in April that I mentioned on the previous page. On the water side, same flow. We have operating revenues coming in, then we have water pays rent, and they have to the electric for this building, and other shared assets, common assets, I should say. They have operating expenses, capital expenditures, and significantly more debt service than electric. The net result for 2021 for water is a favorable $51,000 with a budget of zero. Operating revenues were 8.5% or $1.2 million above budget. That was driven primarily by the larger rate increase than was budgeted back in 2019 for 2021. And that rate increase was due to, in part due to cost increases greater than budget, as well as the capital improvement plan that is necessary to keep the infrastructure of water adequately maintained. And that's part of a 10-year capital improvement plan. Customer growth on water was 1.1%, and budget was 1%. Operating expenses were slightly over budget for the water division. I did have I have two items that are adjustments to this presentation. That's why I say that the presented information is preliminary prior to audit presentation, et cetera, and the general manager did his due diligence, particularly on the water side, and we're seeing that I was struggling a little bit with this first item. Water operations payroll was kind of right at budget, and that didn't make sense to us, in particular to the general manager, because of the vacancy in the water utility director position. And I agreed with him, but I wasn't seeing the forest for the tree, or the trees for the forest. But we met earlier today and did resolve that. So there needs to be a slight shift in for the fact that Brian was not only interim general manager for the first part of 2021, but then he was general manager, and yet the cost got charged entirely to water, like he was still the water utility director. So that adjustment needs to be made between water and electric. It's not fair to water to absorb 100% of Brian's cost for 2021, the general manager's cost for 2021, and so I'll be making that adjustment here after this meeting. Investment income I mentioned earlier, it's down, of course, in water. Capital expenditures for water were actually over budget, and that was due to the non-budgeted pipeline replacement project in 2021 that was funded through that rate, mainly through that rate increase that was approved for 2021. $3 million in debt service in alignment with, and that's in alignment with the scheduled debt service schedules and payments. Details are listed here, and that does not include the additional, I believe it's about $3.2 million incremental payment for Donner Lake Assessment District. We had the cash funds available due to investment done over 13 years ago. So we paid off that debt service that's kind of unrelated to our rate-funded debt service. We made that payment in July of 2021, saving future interest costs of $200,000. And then notably on transfers, we did clean up policy with relation to, we had an operating reserve that was on the books but not in our district code, and so we cleaned that up and just absorbed that into the general fund operate, which is our operating reserve. As far as key balances and reserves, the operating reserve shows a just over 5 million or 500,000 favorable to 50% of operating expenses. That number will go up for the previously mentioned adjustment for general manager compensation and the split between electric and water in accordance with budget. But it's also going to come down slightly, and that's the second item. We had a financial statement review meeting this morning in preparation for audit, and in 2021, we received $300,000 in grant funds from the state for a generator, and those are restricted funds, and so they're sitting right now and reflected in this operating cash balance, and I need to move about I think it's about 260,000 of that, because we did spend a little bit of the money, but not all of it, so 260 of that needs to come out into a restricted account. It's restricted funds that would not be appropriate to present as part of the operating reserve. So the net change on this will be, it's not a material amount as far as a net change in operating reserve. Capital reserve is significantly under the goal for water utility, and we are working on that, and that's part of our long-range financial master plan as part of the 2022-2023 budget that was approved in the fall. Let's see. Not specific to budget, but I thought it warrants conversation. Just a reminder of significant amount of arrearages that do exist due to the pandemic. And as of February 1st, 2022, there's $284,000 in 90-day plus arrearages, water and electric combined. The district has had has provided a COVID relief program for those that can show evidence of a pandemic loss of income, and to date we've provided $119,000 to 383 customers. We have not spent the total amount that's been approved. And then in January of this year, 2022, we did receive American Rescue Plan federal funds through the state of $214,000 that will be applied to our customer accounts here in the next 30 to 45 days. So that will significantly draw down that arrearage balance for our customers. There's no direct financial impact to this report on the 2021 financial performance of the district. And there's no transfers recommended due to we did some mid-year transfers, and those numbers were factored into the projections for 2021. So the recommendation is to accept this report of budget performance for 2021 end of year, which includes significant variances identified since the adoption of the budget for 2020 and 2021. With that, I will stop my presentation and open it up for board or other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Salmon,
Thank you, Michael.
for giving us all of that information, which is a little bit of review, for which I'm thankful, because it takes a while for it to sink in. Is there any public comment on this item this evening? I don't think there is. No, Madam President. Thank you. I gathered. Which opens it up to the board for our questions or comments, and this time I'm going to start at the far end with Director Harris.
Sure. Mike, thank you so much for this. I know it's a bit of a shell game and trying to keep the two utilities financially, on the up and up, transparent, fiscally responsible, and I appreciate all the work that you've done with this. It's not an easy thing to understand, and still after this, you let it kind of sit and process, and there's still probably going to be more questions down the line, but you always do such a good job with, trying to keep us notified of what's going on, so thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Laliotis.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I know a lot of effort goes into keeping these numbers moving forward on a daily basis, and presenting them can always be tough, so I appreciate your new little strategy up there. So, a couple questions, and I really don't have anything of substance with relation to the budget. I just wanted maybe some updates on the arrearages. So, a question on the $214,000 that we got from the American Rescue Plan Act. That's the federal. Is that different than what the state has been trying to implement?
I believe they're one and the same. The state kind of treats it as a state program, but in reality, they're federal funds that were given to the state to administer.
Okay, so this was
I believe they're one and the same.
This was the program we were working with the
Yes, sir.
Department of.
CAP CAPP through the CSD is on the electric side.
Okay.
And then the water boards for EAR program through, for water.
Okay. So it looks like, between the two programs, we have a little over, between our own internal program. So, but our own internal program, that 119,000 has been dispersed already. Correct.
Correct. It's reflected in those arrearage balances. in a
So, right, the
favorable
current arrearage balance of what, 298, was that right?
280,
200.
284, 90 days plus.
Okay, so the 214 we've received from the feds or state or whoever, that has not been applied to that balance yet. Okay.
Correct.
All right. Cool. Now, I'm sure getting through all the paperwork to get that money was probably a challenge, so I really appreciate it. I think it will be a great service to our community to get those dollars distributed, and make a dent in our arrearages here, so, and benefit those who have been challenged with.
Just an added note on that, Director Aliotis, is those arrearages from the $214,000 from the federal and state programs are applicable for arrearages accrued up to June of last year, Mike?
Yes.
So any arrearages accrued after that, these funds don't apply to that.
Got it. Okay.
So we'll have an updated arrearages total in the next board meeting.
There's always a catch, right? Okay, no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate staff doing whatever they can to help our community, so. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Laliotis.
Hey, Michael, I'm glad you're here.
I am as well.
I'm glad we have you, especially with the big numbers we have around here. Did you say earlier that we're like 3% over budget? Was it 3%? Because of the storms and,
Yes, operating expenses for electric were about 1.5 million over budget, and the majority of that was driven by the storm damage in December.
Yeah, when you say it in dollars, that sounds like a lot of money.
It does add up.
I hear 3% better.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound so much. But I know you stay up on this budget stuff, and I'm sure glad you do, and I'm glad we have you here, and that's about it for me, because you have all the figures and you did all the work. So I'll accept that.
Thank you, Director Laliotis. Laliotis, I'm sorry, Director Aguirre, I apologize. Yeah, I'm going to echo my other board members. I think, I'm going to point out one thing, that I believe that there is another potentially sum of money coming to address arrearages that have occurred since June, if I recall correctly from the CMUA presentation that we had a couple weeks ago. So we keep our fingers crossed there will be more to address that time frame from
Thank you.
June.
Thank you. Correct. Those discussions are happening.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. It's not here yet, so that's something to keep our eyes out. So thank you also for presenting us all this information in a way that we can help us to understand all of the moving pieces with the PUD. And with that, I am looking for a motion.
It says right up there that I'll move that we accept this report of budget performance for 2021, end of the year, which includes a significant variance as well. The rest
Yeah.
is words. So I move for the motion to be passed, or this budget to be report passed.
You got it. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Thank you, Director Aguirre.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Yes.
Director Laliotis.
Yes.
President Finn.
Yes.
The record will note that Vice President Bender is absent.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the workshop that I'm very much looking forward to. And thank everybody for your patience of listening to our business. So workshop, Mr. Poncelet and our committee are going to present to us our Community Broadband Committee update. There we go. Leave it at that.
Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. I'm very pleased to be here this evening to present the Community Broadband Committee recommendation. I would like to express my gratitude to the committee. It's been a privilege to work with them. I'd also like to thank Regina Cooley in the back there, who did the role of district clerk for the committee, and really greatly appreciated her work as well. Give a very quick history. This stems from our strategic plan. We talked about it earlier. We established the committee. They established a regular meeting schedule and really picked up the work of the GM task force moving forward. They identified scope and goals that have been presented multiple times. So again, eager to get to the recommendation. I'll skip through those, but that formed the work of the committee. The committee did have numerous meetings, broke into 3 working groups, and this evening we have to present for the committee Dan Dickerman, Bjorn Book-Larsen, Penelope Jernberg, and Sarita Cox. And with that, I will pass it on to Dan, and I'm going to switch out of this presentation and go to them. Nope, excuse me, I'm in the wrong one. Where is it? TD, there it is. And you can see their work is substantial in megabytes as well. And so, I'd tell a joke, but Brian, general manager, would get angry at me. So, And there we go. I'll be driving. Thank you. Mr. Dickerman.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. My name is Dan Dickerman, one of the volunteers on the committee investigating the PUD's potential role in improving broadband internet access for our community, voted a top priority in the district's recent survey. Our goals here today are to give some specifics on how our community's broadband internet access falls short of our needs, identify some resources available which can create paths toward improvement, and present options of roles the PUD could play in moving our community forward. Next slide, please. During our investigation, it has become clear that our status quo is no longer acceptable, that broadband access in our community needs to be improved, and we need to find the best way for our community to invest in that infrastructure in a way which provides the greatest benefit to everyone. Broadband internet access is no longer a luxury, but is becoming a utility, a requirement for the way many of us live, learn, and work. And the TDPUD is uniquely positioned to invest in infrastructure which can benefit everyone. To give a perspective on our community's broadband needs, allow me to introduce Sarita Cox.
Thanks so much, Dan, and thank you. Good evening, President Finn, board members, and Truckee PUD staff. So let's first start with grounding ourselves in what do we mean by community broadband, just so that we have a ground, we're all on the same page. So when we're talking about community broadband, we're not just talking about broadband into people's houses. We're talking about broadband being used by local businesses, by our town institutions, libraries, hospitals, schools, et cetera, and our very own infrastructure here at the Truckee PUD in the town. If we want to understand what do we mean by minimum broadband, let's talk about where the FCC has set it. So in 2015, the FCC said minimum broadband requirements for a resident into the house are 25 up and 3 down on megabits. That was set in 2015. I'll let you know that Congress is currently working on new minimum standards of 100 up and 25 down. For businesses, we're looking at, generally speaking, you look at about 10 to 15 megabits per employee or user. That's very important. We have a lot of people using free Wi-Fi every time they go into a business here in Truckee, so it's not just employees, it's the users as well. So you're really looking at 1 gig symmetric, but usually 5 to 10 is where you should be looking at. But that's today. We know that things just keep accelerating. Distance learning, video streaming, telecommuting is here to stay. And 1 gig up and down is going to be the norm for our residences, not just our businesses. And if we look out 5, 10 years from now, we're looking more around the 10 gig up and down. So that's baseline where we are. So let's go see how Truckee currently is doing. We're barely delivering. This shows how a public fix test results in our neighborhoods here. And you can see that we're not even hitting the 2015 minimum guidelines set by the FCC, let alone where Congress is going very shortly. But that's not the whole story. Reality is actually worse because we do not have reliability in our broadband. This is just a small sampling of what happens when you go onto Facebook, Truckee Tahoe People, and search internet or Suddenlink. And while it's kind of funny to see all these comments, been out for a week, 2 weeks, it's reality. And this is not fun and games. This is not people losing their television or their ability to stream videos or play video games. This is people losing their livelihood. We have people who work from home. We have students who are doing distance learning. And this is resulting in them losing losing their ability to pay their bills. But we're not here to discuss how to make this bad better. Our committee was tasked to look at the need of the entire community and make recommendations. So I'm going to walk through very quickly the 7 different stakeholders that we see are key components of the Truckee community. You have more details in the package that you have, but I'll quickly run through them step by step. So let's start with residents. So our residents need reliable, affordable broadband and more of it. You just have to go on Facebook or Nextdoor to see that we do not currently have reliable broadband in our houses. We need affordability. 23% of Truckee residents earn less than $50,000 a year. Yet Suddenlink internet starts at $89.99 a month, plus taxes and fees. And of course, we need more broadband. I already told you about that. Let's go to tourists. Tourists, there's almost 250,000 tourists that visit Truckee annually. They spend $150 million, they support 1,500 jobs, and they generate $5.6 million in taxes. They might be here in the mountains, but they haven't taken a vacation from their tech. And they expect service equivalency to what they have back home. And if we can't deliver it, they'll go somewhere else. Local businesses. We have over 1,000 local businesses in Truckee, employing thousands of residents and delivering $4.9 million in local sales tax revenue. They have an ever-increasing dependence on the internet. Even our smallest mom-and-pop shops use point of sale, reservation systems, online banking, online inventory management, security, cloud storage, and communications. And this does not even include all the residents and tourists who feel that they have the right to hop on to their internet for free to communicate, to surf the web, and to check Caltrans cameras on Highway 80. So again, fast, reliable, affordable, and able to take the load that happens all the time up here. Community and anchor institutions. Schools, libraries, our hospitals, community colleges, public media, public housing. We need to think about all of them, including our nonprofits. Again, fast, reliable, able to take the load. We're moving into an era of telehealth where live, real-time, critical communications are important, not just between hospitals, but just to give you a case example, this past December snowstorm, you couldn't even get to a hospital. So it just so happened that during that snowstorm, one of my neighbors was having seizures every few minutes because of new meds. You know you darn well want to be able to get a hold of your doctor so that they can treat you even if you can't make it into the hospital. But without reliable broadband, that's not going to happen. Town safety. Fire. We know it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. And I'd hate to be trying to get out of Tahoe-Donner, Glenshire, or anywhere along 267 or 89 without ample warning. That requires broadband. And just to, if fire wasn't bad enough, let me touch on the third rail of power up here. Let's face it, we really need a truly smart grid and not just one-way reporting that we have today, but one that can actually effectively manage the peaks as we have visitors and to balance power loads. I live and work in Prosser, and you don't want to know how many times every single day my lights flash. And finally, our ISP partners. Yeah, I'm talking about Suddenlink. If we actually shared a backbone with some ISP partners, we could decrease their cost and perhaps entice others to come in to give us more choice. As the president said last night, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. So these are our 7 major stakeholders in our Truckee community. We think they can all be served, and we think that the Truckee PUD has a duty to serve them. So to give you some solutions on how you all can serve our community better, let me hand it over to Penny.
Right. Thanks, Sarita. Thanks, Dan. Good evening, President Finn and members of the board. Thanks for having us here tonight. So I was tasked with some fellow committee members to explore business models. And we were, sorry, can you hear me okay? How's that? Is that better? Okay. I'm infamously a quiet talker, so thank you. So our task was to look at those potential business models. And I'll start with saying that when we were exploring this, one of the difficulties was trying to understand really where do we draw the line in the sand of more information, less information, when would a consultant do more information or provide more information, more context. So this is really meant as kind of a high-level overview of what we could find. There's countless examples out there, a lot of information. These are just some of the larger opportunities that we looked at. So to start with, for the business models, some examples that we had, the first one is an ownership model. In this model, a PUD would build out and maintain a fiber optic network. You could use it for that smart grid technology, and as a separate entity per requirements, would offer internet access directly to customers, could lease fiber access for smart city technologies, and to other regulatory agencies, Town of Truckee, Nevada, Placer counties. Another business model, our second one here, open access business model. This was a fairly popular one with the examples that we explored. And this opportunity, a PUD would build out and maintain the fiber optic network, use it for that technology, and bring on multiple ISPs to offer internet access services. So it would work collaboratively with ISPs. Lease the fiber access for smart city technologies to the counties and Town of Truckee. And then moving on to the third one, our private-public partnership model. PUD would jointly build and maintain a fiber optic network with an ISP. So the PUD in this example would use it for smart grid technology, and the ISP would offer internet access directly to customers. One or both entities could lease the fiber access for smart city technologies to the counties and Town of Truckee. In our fourth business model example here, the ISP ownership model, the ISP builds and maintains the fiber optic network and offers internet services directly to customers. So those retail or open access wholesale. It would lease the fiber access to the PUD for smart grid technology and the fiber access for smart city technologies to counties and cities. Great, thank you. And these are some of the examples of actual communities and PUDs that are currently offering these different models. So to start with, the ownership model, just a quick overview of that. It's community-owned. PUD identified the need and utilized government grants to fund infrastructure and build-outs. Two example communities for this that are linked in here are Sandy, Oregon, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. They have been online and offering these services for a long time. The build-out funding, and again, these are not meant to be definitive examples or information, so there's a lot more to it. That build-out funding doesn't include every funding stream that they looked at. It's just an overview of some of the possibilities. But they did utilize federal funding for smart grid build-outs. Just an example, time frame to build out the infrastructure was 2 to 3 years. And through all of these examples, those years and timeframes were differed based on what those identified needs were. So different communities would have a couple years, some might have longer. In our open access partnership model, the communities we identified that utilize those are Jefferson, Washington, and Ammon, Idaho. An overview of what that is, they're currently offered to select businesses. So partnered with a few different ISPs and developed through consultation rounds is what this looked like. They did also utilize federal funding for open access infrastructure. In these examples, what I found interesting is they phased in low-income neighborhoods with high needs first. So the expansion was based on funding availability. They really prioritized what the needs were in the community before moving forward. In our third model, the public-private partnership, it's a partnership with the private entity which owns the total process but could be offered to PUD clients. One example of this is currently a process that's going on in Yuba City through an organization called Sci-Fi. They do also partner with a variety of other communities in California and nationally. It's a privately held organization that is working with PUDs and other entities to offer the infrastructure as that private company. So this example was that privately held funding through the corporate entity that partnered with public utilities and public communities. And similar build out, because it's still that long-term build out of infrastructure, was 2 to 3 years. And the fourth and final business example here, which again is not exhaustive, so there were a variety of other options that could be out there. This is just kind of the most popular high-level one. A co-op and ISP, so this is co-owned by service users and the ISP. And one example here that we found was actually our neighbors at Plumas Sierra Telecommunications. And when I say that, really, it's how they're offering internet in their community, not related to any other contracts. So the way that that was funded was through grant funding, and then also certainly through, their ongoing regular costs to clients. And the time to build out was also 2 to 3 years. So similar infrastructure timeframe for those build outs. Moving on to those conclusions for these case examples. So really, to start with, there's a significant and growing need for broadband access, and PUDs nationwide are responding to that. So we found so many solutions and so many PUDs that were adopting broadband as an offering to their client base that again, it was hard to really narrow down because there were so many examples. And as we previously outlined, there is plenty of need in our community. And really, every community is different. So we all know that we live in a really unique community, as we've continued to hear about this evening. As our unique needs kind of evolve, and as we figure out what the needs of our community are, this is one more opportunity to kind of come up with that unique solution and figure out what that looks like. So every community is different, has different solutions. There's a lot of variety that is available and for infrastructure and funding. So there's not an exhaustive list, a variety of funding streams out there. The priority for other PUDs has been and continues to be focusing on those low-income resident needs. And PUDs are providing that subsidized access through digital divide funding. Just to add on to that anecdotally, while remote teaching my kids, I met a variety of families that couldn't access education because they didn't have broadband. So that's just one note, but that's certainly not exhaustive. And then every PUD case example started by identifying the community need for broadband as a utility. So that's kind of where we are at the starting point. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Bjorn.
All right, Madam President, members of the committee. So first, a little bit of background. I have spent about 20 years of my life building computer games and networks and systems, and did the crazy thing 5 years ago, moved to Truckee. And I was told by our HOA that the fastest high-speed, quote-unquote, internet we could get was 5 megabit DSL from AT&T. And that was very exciting, and we still moved here. But I had to use my 20 years worth of networking experience to build the Frankenstein system to give ourselves enough speed so we could actually operate from up here and continue to work remotely. Next slide. So the good news, and I'm very happy to have been able to join this committee and sort of look at the systems the PUD already owns. It was a bit surprising to realize that the PUD actually owns and controls an enormous amount of infrastructure that actually make up a majority of the kind of systems you need as an ISP. So the three areas you have is you have the long-range regional fibers, which is somewhat unusual. for an operation of this type that goes from Sacramento all the way to Reno, that gives you interconnectivity to a lot of different networks. You have the medium range fiber elements, about 60 miles worth and growing, where you interconnect your own facilities, of course, for the purpose of monitoring your water and electrical systems. And what's interesting about that is, of course, it looks very much like a fiber backbone would look in a large, dense urban area, even though you're using it primarily for your internal systems. And then you have your power and data center and rack systems to basically support those. So what's interesting about this is you obviously began your partnership with Pluma Sierra Telecom, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you actually have quite a bit of elements that I, as a tech person, would look at as some great resources for any community. Next slide. So when we talked about this in the committee, it's as if you have a trial public-private partnership already in place with Pluma Sierra. And it's been interesting to watch that, because what Plumas has seemingly done has been to connect to low-hanging fruit customers, which are very close to the existing fiber grid, and then they have put their equipment inside of the PUD's data centers and then operate it as a virtual ISP, and generally hasn't incurred the last mile connectivity cost except for in a few cases. So you sort of have trialed this out with PST right now. And what's interesting about it is they, of course, provide services the PUD doesn't have. For example, 24/7 data center and IT support, which you guys do on the electrical and water side, but they're doing it on the ISP side. But I think it's been useful to see the type of customers they chose to connect. Some large HOAs have gone on their network, the hospital, and a few other big facilities, including the PUD itself as a business. So next slide. And what's interesting when we look at this from the outside is, if the PUD wanted to, when you look at those 4 different business models that my colleagues talked about, wanted to actually fill the gap and become an ISP, you could do that, and the amount of equipment you would need to do so isn't actually super extensive from an IT side. The biggest challenge you're going to have as a public utility district is to get the last mile connectivity with some kind of reasonable set of services to the households. Trenching costs are really high. There are some interesting timing options here, because 5G systems and campus-style 5G systems now are a real thing. You could imagine a system that's a hybrid between trenching fiber to those where you can reach them reasonably cheaply, and letting everyone else essentially use a 5G device that then connects to the public ISP network. So it's not using the existing Verizons and T-Mobiles of the world, it's actually having a private network with its own set of routers. So that's an interesting possibility that exists today that really didn't exist as recently as 3 or 4 years ago. And then clearly what doesn't exist within the PUD today is qualified IT 24/7 support, which basically to handle a customer base of this size. However, from an IT tech person's point of view, those are quote-unquote small problems, which, it's a tech support. They're very critical, of course, to the success of any of these type of operations. So I think from our end, as we talk this through, it feels like you have a good chunk of the systems and components needed. With the PSD partnership, what's interesting is that's kind of shown you what could be done. We got some public comment in one of our committee meetings from other ISPs talking about also being able to get on the network and kind of sit alongside a Pluma Sierra and then operate in parallel with them. And I think that's probably a good idea. The challenge here is, of course, the PD should probably pick a longer-term strategy before you sort of open up to a lot of different providers. But there is clearly interest from the provider community to do it. Next slide. So in short, and this is just a summary, it's an interesting position for the PUD. You have ownership of equipment and experience essentially with this partnership. You have an existing network that can be used as a backbone, and then you have several different business models. The 4 that we identified in those cities that already do that, none of them are out of the realm of what you could do. And obviously from our side, our hope is we can serve people all the way from those who are needing to do remote schooling, low-income communities, all the way up to sort of the mass influx of tourists that show up. And if we can put together a community-wide system that can handle that, I think that would be great for the entire area. And I think that's it for our presentation. We have a conclusion, which I believe Dan will be doing. Thank you for your time.
So, recommendations. To recap, our community needs investment in broadband to bring us all up to par with 21st century needs and to prepare us for the future. With broadband access being treated more and more like utility, the PUD is in a unique position to leverage existing resources, access, economies of scale, and a variety of possible infrastructure and business models which could bring equitable and affordable broadband access throughout our community. We need a broadband infrastructure where all providers, from fixed point access through mobile, have options to leverage community resources to offer improved services which reach everyone. Our community needs to invest public funds in infrastructure, and we have to be careful to invest in ways which maximize benefit to the community as a whole, retain public control, and won't give a handful of internet businesses unfair advantage, which drives other providers out of business. We envision a system where private ISPs can each compete on a level playing field based on the user-level services and transit services that they offer, not by leveraging the monopolies that they have today based on who owns the nearest wire. There's a reason we've talked a lot about fiber optical tonight. Fiber optical? Yes, fiber optics tonight. It is the foundation of every modern high-speed network, including those where the last mile is reached by a variety of wired or wireless technologies. The more we invest in fiber infrastructure and the closer we can expand that fiber reach toward every need, the greater our return on that investment will be for years to come. Next slide. With a vision toward utility-grade access to broadband, the TDPUD needs to move this initiative forward by collaborating across the community with consultants, local agencies, and existing and potentially new ISPs. There are many resources available to engage the PUD staff in leveraging the experiences of other community-based broadband initiatives across the country, and we've provided many of the resources here which point to potential paths forward. I'd like to reiterate what some of our members noted and encourage you to read through some of the more detailed information we've provided in the appendices of the presentation packet. We urge you to take advantage of the broadband funding initiatives now gaining momentum in California and across the country, and use this unique time to invest in our entire community's future. Thank you.
Wow.
There you go. Thank you for the presentation. I'll turn it over to you. Before I go back to, our remaining slides are no fiscal impact associated with this informational item, although decisions certainly will have fiscal impacts. And, the recommendation is to receive this report and provide direction to staff.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Board. I want to say thank you very much. I felt that this community had a real depth of knowledge and experience and expertise in this, and you have completely solidified that I was right, which is nice. Doesn't happen that often. So thank you so much for putting in the time and the energy to help us sort through this for our community, because as you have so ably pointed out, I think it's vital. I don't know how we're going to become the town that we need to be to weather the weather in the future. So I'm going to open it up to comments and questions from the board. We have all of these resources in front of us.
Yes, it's amazing. I can just feel the passion within this, room here. And I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this. It's always confusing to me, and this actually provides much more clarity. And I liked the 4 business models that you provided, and it gives us an understanding of what options are out there and what have other communities done for broadband. So I think that pretty much every time I talk to somebody in the community and they find out that I'm on the PUD board, the first thing they say is, we need broadband. So I do recognize that it is an important part of the community, and we do have tools to keep moving this project forward. So I appreciate you helping us make those steps. And of course, the next question at some point that's going to need to be answered is, what are the costs? What is this going to cost us? And are we going to have enough customers to help support that cost, or is that going to be something that us as a community, as a PUD, provides it, at least provides the infrastructure, and I don't know. That will be probably further discussions as we get down more into the weeds. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Harris.
So, yeah, just a tremendous amount of work. You should all be proud of your time and efforts, and we certainly appreciate your dedication, your time, your efforts, and all the time you've donated to bringing this presentation, this passion, these ideas. I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't believe that this town doesn't need broadband or better internet connectivity. Clearly, the need exists. You guys have clearly pointed that out. So, there's a lot of options out here. We as a board at some point, will need to continue to understand what the right steps are for moving forward with some type of partnership with our own infrastructure and trying to weave it into the multiple business models that have been presented. In the suggested next steps, there was a discussion about a strategic broadband plan. I don't know, Stephen or anyone else can maybe elaborate a little bit on that and what perhaps the goal of that plan would be?
I would defer to the committee for that. That's their recommendation. I mean, staff certainly has ideas on where to go, but I would let them respond to that.
So we'll do some tag team. I think if you start from the point of view of which role does the PUD take, there's obviously costs associated with each one of these lines that you choose, and then you have to marry that to one of the at least 4 different business models. And there's a fair amount of unknowns, right, if you're trying to actually do a cost kind of benefit analysis of these 2 pieces. And I think you heard we have a lot of passion around, can we make it equitable access? Can we, sort of fill in all those gaps? So I think that's really the next step, is to figure out for the 4 different business models and for the 3 different areas where you have gaps from a technology side to support all 4, what are the different costs/partnerships that you could have in each one of those areas? And Sarita will take over.
So we envision a strategic plan that really starts at truly understanding the demand. To your point, would there be customers, right? What is the demand? We outlined 7 stakeholders, but honestly, there needs to be more due diligence into who are the stakeholders, what do they want, what can they afford to pay, all that sort of stuff, right? What do they need? And not only today, but you need to be looking out 5 to 10 years, because when you're building something like this, you should be looking at 100 gig symmetrical is what you're trying to deliver. So you're going to need a plan that gets you there. So what is it on the demand side? And then what models exist? And our recommendation would be to look at a few models and understand the pros and cons of going into various models. Because not one model is going to serve them all, right? And then from there, you can then detail out what is a plan of action. I do think the one thing I would stress to you all is to be as transparent as possible as you go through this process. because broadband is such a hot button issue here in Truckee, that the more transparent you are around, this is what you're going to do, you're going to do this investment, you're going to do this understanding of need, of different models, go on site to see different models, whatever it is, be transparent, because I think the community will be behind you if you do that.
And if I could add just one other point to that, I think to Director Harris's point earlier, the question of how many people would buy into a system that got built, how much demand is there, but really how many people would buy the service. And I think a key piece of that goes back to this discussion of these models, these different business models that we've put forth. And you really kind of need to research, as you approach each of these models, who would buy in. And on one extreme, you have a model where the PUD is only filling in the gaps. You're looking at customers who are not currently served specifically today, and you're providing the services that they absolutely don't have. And how many people do you have that would buy into that? How many customers would you get to that kind of model? And at the other extreme, you're trying to share it amongst all providers. You're providing a backbone that is used by Suddenlink, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Oasis, and all of the broadband providers that are currently in town and new ones. And you're making something that can be shared, and then you're not asking how many customers are we reaching directly, but how are we able to provide a platform that everybody's going to want, that other ISPs are then working and building their business off of. And then you're selling within the business community as well as to the home. So there's a wide range of things to consider there.
Sorry. One last note, which just for scale comparison, when we met with Pluma Sierra and we had a discussion with their CEO, the conversation was that they have roughly 3,000 active customers, not here, but in their district and across the region that they serve. And you guys obviously have about 15,000 or so for the water and electrical side. So, there is some number between those two where either you partner with people who then scale up to support 15,000, or you provide a platform, or you decide to serve everyone sort of directly as an ISP, right? But that's roughly the scale that's around here. Plumas has about 3,000 customers.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm in favor of beginning to drill down further into this complex issue. We do, me personally as a board member feel like I do want to help move this initiative along and provide whatever support we can as a local government, an infrastructure owner, and a fiber optic infrastructure owner to best serve this community. There are certainly a million things that still need to be answered for us to, go down the road of making real firm decisions. But I truly believe that we can be, we can help this community get to those goals. How we do that is what we need to figure out and what we need to study. This process got started a long time ago, kind of hit a roadblock and kind of went to the side for a while. But in the background, I think the district understood the importance of it and sort of quietly built up its fiber optic network, whether it be for the intention of understanding that there was going to be for their own infrastructure or perhaps serve dual purpose. And I appreciate everyone who was either in this room or was in this room or has been a part of the utility district and having the foresight to continue to push forward with putting fiber in the ground as every opportunity existed, because if that didn't happen, we wouldn't be probably having this discussion today. Shout out to everyone who was involved getting us to where we are today. And once again, thank you for all your time and efforts. I think I have a better understanding of some of the ideas. I support moving forward with trying to continue to build upon these ideas and these business models to really start to define what can work in this community. So that's it for now.
Sorry. Thank you, Director Laliotis.
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the committee for being here tonight and give us this input that you guys have worked pretty hard on. And I just wonder, now the committee isn't going to end because you gave us a good report tonight, right?
That's a good question.
We'll continue on because we're the beneficiaries. We're taking in what you are bringing to us. And like I'm sitting here going, okay, what do we do next? Where do we go next? Do we investigate the models, what different models we got? Or I was thinking too, maybe we should have a survey of our ratepayers, put a little survey in the billing and see how much back information we get from them. That'll give us an idea of how many are interested and how many are maybe not interested. But I remember the evening that we were here having our board meeting, and our general manager says, well, we have a chance to get this broadband that's coming into Truckee, and the town doesn't want to buy it, and he said a town without the broadband is a town that will regress. He says that is the coming thing, and it should be here. And I remember his statement. I mean, that's the only thing I remember about the whole thing. But then it kind of went away a little bit. But we did use it, and we're using it to whatever process we can. And so I am for naturally going forward and keeping the committee. I don't know. I haven't got it. Steve, is the committee going to go on?
I think that's open for discussion, and we're looking for direction from the board.
Oh, well. Good. I hope it goes on, directions from the board.
Have you
Thank you, sir.
glitches?
And so we'll see what the next step is, and then we'll hit that.
Thank you, Director Aguera. Thank you for your
Sure.
comments. Same thank you for your work so far, and I look forward to your continued work because I feel like you're in our clutches and we're going to keep you there. So yeah, I think you answered a lot of my questions as you sort of got up after the presentation. To me, it seems kind of clear, like we need to parse through the pros and the cons of the different business models that you have brought up and which ones or combination of them will work for us here. It's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Do you decide on a model and then explore funding opportunities, or do you look at funding opportunities and develop the model based around what's available? I don't know, but those are the things that would be on the top of my mind. I think you were very clear in your suggested next steps. I feel like we are, with the 4 board members that are here, that we already have consensus perhaps on the first step, agreeing that broadband should be seen as a utility. And the TDPUD, we are well positioned to facilitate development of broadband for all of Truckee. I feel, is that an accurate reflection of the rest of the board, or is that just me? It's just a yes or no.
No, I would agree. No, we are uniquely positioned, and as I said earlier, I feel like we have the opportunity to be part of the solution. And, when it comes to funding, I would, one of my concerns with funding is oftentimes it's the unserved that gets, sort of the low-hanging fruit. The underserved kind of follows up with that. But there's also, these funding agencies are looking at different demographics and things like that. So we have to be very cautious to explore funding opportunities for our community that are realistic and available, and that funding agencies will look at Truckee and our median house prices and everything of the above and go, yes, you deserve a grant. I've experienced that from other granting agencies on the water side, on utility side, and it's quite disheartening to watch that money go somewhere else. I'm sure it went to a good place, but we get penalized for living in the mountains in a resort community, and so just to caution however we go down the road of exploring grant funding, it's very important to make sure that it's realistic and available to our demographics and our community.
Yeah, I think that's, again, where partnerships are going to be really vital in this endeavor, across the town of Truckee, the PUD, and whatever other, Sierra Business Council, how we can all support each other in trying to land some of those funds, because I think you're right, that's a needle to thread. I mean, obviously, we have need here, so somehow we have to convince the money gods that they should shake the tree here a little bit. I think Director Aguero was pretty clear that you were very clear in your comments that moving forward, you were supportive of doing that.
I was going to say, this committee, I feel tonight that this is the kickoff.
That's right. That's exactly right. The table's set.
The game's on now, so now we got to get some yardage.
That's right.
With
Director
the
Harris?
next step, maybe suggest putting out an RFP for the consultant for the strategic broadband plan. The only caveat is that I don't want to get into analysis paralysis and overanalyze everything. So that's just one of the concerns I have, but.
I absolutely agree with that.
Because I don't know how much would a consultant cost? I mean, is it going to be $20,000? Is it going to be $100,000? I'm not sure what the ballpark figures are for something like that. It depends on what you want.
Yeah, I think that's a great discussion. We have budgeted funds set aside for the board initiatives. They're conservative, but that initial study, I think we have the funding for that if that were the decision to move forward.
Didn't I hear that there's funds from the state of California also to kick us off to help us start this project?
I would let the committee answer on that, what they've discovered in the research.
All right, on funding, yes, I agree. Although what Director Laliotis mentioned about Truckee doesn't necessarily fit the demographic that a lot of the funding streams look to fund. Although I will underscore that 23% of our residents earn less than $50,000. So there is some. That said, with the infrastructure bill that passed, and with the fact that the state of California has a $1.9 billion surplus to be spent this year, there is more money than ever to be had. So the question is not, is there money? It's how do we get our fair share? And that's where I think you could get some savvy support around people understanding the sources of funds. Some of it comes through the CPUC, but not all of it. You can think of it, you look at Department of Labor, you look at Department of Ed, you look at, I actually sit on the Behavioral Health Subcommittee of HHS for the state of California. There's huge discussions around telehealth and funding there. So it's not just your normal sources of CPUC funding that you should be looking at. I do think that is one of the soonest things you need to do is look at those funding streams, because it may actually lead to what models are more likely to get funded than others. And then the other thing, I think we forgot to mention that, is it Nevada is actually doing a survey on, Nevada County. And so there, that will help on the demand side and getting you the data that you need to make the kind of decisions around models and how many potential customers and stuff like that.
Thank you, Sarita. You just answered my chicken and egg question. So funding is your,
So we have another little push.
yeah?
And President Finn, if I may add, the funding in the PUD budget, we put $40,000 per initiative, which was, so there's a total bucket of 160,000. Our initial kind of forays into feasibility studies and business plans, which is kind of what we're talking about here, are more hundreds of thousands of dollars than tens of thousands of dollars. But there is funding out there, CPUC in this case, to do those studies. So one potential path is you spend $40,000 to go get $300,000 to do the work you want, for example. So there are different paths that we could do. We could try to fund the entire thing, but that would come at the expense perhaps of funding for other initiatives. And again, that's a question for priorities of the budget we do have. But these are the types of paths that we've initially explored.
Okay, so we have little seed money, and we have to gauge how to use that most effectively to get us through step 3, which that's the real starting point here, is we have to get to engaging an appropriate consultant to do a study that suits our needs. Okay, I think that's clear. Okay, Penny?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add on that when we were exploring those business model options, there were a lot of consultants that were out there. So a ton of opportunities for RFPs on varying scales of funds that were required, including, I think, quite a few that were fairly local, familiar with our community as well. So I just wanted to kind of add that piece as well, that I don't think it's too far off from what is out there and what's available.
Well, that is useful, because as we've already sort of discussed with our comp study, it's hard to get specificity with, our community is so unique in so many ways that, a consultant is not, even an expert in the field may not necessarily give us the information that is going to be the most valuable to us, so.
Madam President?
Yes.
I'm wondering if it's a good time to call for public comment before
Oh.
you get too far into your consensus.
I was already super in the weeds. Yes, then why don't we do that?
And the only one we had is the one submitted earlier. Would you like to read that, or would you like me to read that?
I can read it, but give me a minute to get to it. It's in my email.
Can you do a comment from the floor?
Please.
If you would like to start with the comment from the floor, that would be great. And then that'd give me a minute to.
Hi, board. Hi, staff. Hi, committee. Awesome job. My name is Reed Cox. I am a 20-year Truckee resident and ratepayer. My wife and I run a national organization out of Truckee. Within the state of California, we have about 75 employees. I will tell you that the only staff that we have that have unreliable internet and cost me in productivity is here in Truckee. In no other community nationwide, no other community in California. Excuse me. I say that because I would like to encourage you to think, when you're doing your financial analysis, of the cost associated in loss of productivity, in loss of opportunity for our students, loss of life for people who need telemedicine. You are absolutely right. There's going to be a cost associated with this project, but I think if you can quantify in your FP&A the cost of not pursuing this project on the lives of this community, our youth, our businesses, our health, I think you'd be doing a great disservice to this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. And our second public comment we received via email is from Oasis Broadband. So Oasis Broadband is a local provider of internet services. We have worked to provide the communities inside Placer and Nevada County, and specifically Truckee, with broadband options for 20 years and serve thousands of customers who buy our services largely because the current providers are not meeting the needs of the community in terms of their coverage or their performance. We have been fighting for the most remote as well as the most underserved residents of Truckee, especially during these last 2 years as COVID reshaped the makeup of Truckee residents and the way many Truckee residents used their homes. We added capacity quickly and relentlessly to provide service at locations ignored by the two incumbents in places like Prosser Dam, Juniper Hill, and the developments of Coyote Run and Pinion Creek, and applied for and received county grants to serve the most distant residents of our community in Dog Valley and Klondike Flat, not to mention augmenting our services in Tahoe Donner and expanding services along Highway 89 South. We would like to make the following statements to the board. We support the committee's suggestions presented this evening. That was number one. Number two, ISPs are very interested in working with the PUD to make better broadband a reality for Truckee. 3, we encourage the PUD to partner with additional ISPs who are ready to invest and deliver for every corner and every resident of Truckee. 4, we would like to offer to share what we know about grant funding, the broadband choke points and needs in Truckee, and how wireless can be used to provide an immediate solution to address the failure of Suddenlink and AT&T to provide usable broadband in Truckee. 5, encourage the PUD to accelerate its expenditures on core fiber assets. This would accelerate and facilitate cooperation that would begin to address the community's highly inadequate internet service levels now and also provide for the long-term needs of the town by increasing the availability of ultra-high capacity to the main corners of Truckee. 6, inform the board that we have had proposals for cooperation with the PUD on the table for some time, which haven't been pursued, presumably pending the expiration of the agreement with PST and the outcome of this study. We have a backlog of projects that will allow the PUD to show immediate results for the community if staff is allowed to pursue them. In our opinion, Truckee is in a broadband crisis. The evidence for this are the consistent critical comments on Truckee-related Facebook and Nextdoor pages, some of which are in the presentation you have just seen. Truckee needs alternatives immediately, which architecturally are within easy reach as shown by the successes of the cooperation with the PST. We further agree that the committee's findings that Truckee needs a blueprint for reliable, high-capacity, long-term solution to ensure Truckee's future is not compromised by the lack of a utility as important as broadband. Whew, that was a long sentence. This long-term plan should be a deliberate activity that incorporates every tool, asset, organization, and dollar available, and that may take many smart people and a significant amount of time to construct. The PUD is uniquely positioned to meet many of these needs and can be a supporter and contributor without encountering the kind of resistance it experienced in its previous attempt to lead a broadband revolution if the solution is oriented on facilitation, not domination. Respectfully and optimistically, Devin Koch, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, from Oasis Broadband Internet. So that was our comment from a local ISP provider. Okay. All good things. Yes, Council Gross.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think you can. If I may, I'd like to share a few comments with the board. I don't have any prepared materials, but the information provided by the committee is very enlightening. Obviously, y'all put a lot of work into it. I've learned a lot about the different types of models and opportunities that are out there. And I really very much appreciate their work. And part of what their work has shown is that there's a lot of unknowns, right? But there are some things we do know about our ability, this district's ability to provide broadband services. Without getting too far in the weeds, we are a creature of statute. We're created by the Public Utility District Act. We're created under that law. We operate pursuant to it. And public utility districts throughout California that operate under that law can provide a broad range of utilities, a broad range of services: water, electric, sewer, parks, recreation services, public buildings, public facilities. They're funded through various means. Some are funded through a combination of taxes and ratepayer revenue. We're solely funded through ratepayer revenue. Among the powers in the statutes that public utility districts have is the power to provide communication services. Okay? About more than 20 years ago, this district set off on a path to provide broadband services. And while we don't have many regulatory hurdles that we have to jump over, we know that we have one. And that is, in order to provide communication services, we have to get approval from LAFCO. For those of you that don't know, LAFCO is a local agency formation commission. Every county in California has one. They're unique to California. They don't exist in other states. And LAFCOs have the statutory charge to see for the orderly growth of communities and areas and assure that there's not overlapping services and whatnot. And when a utility such as Truckee Donner Public Utility District currently provides certain services but not others, we provide, obviously, water and electric service. If we want to provide another service that, while we may have statutory authority to provide that service, we have to go to LAFCO to get their approval to activate that power. It's those powers that we don't exercise are called latent powers. And so the power to provide communication services is a latent power, which means we have to go to LAFCO to get authority to do that. 20-some years ago, we went to LAFCO to obtain their approval, and we did get their approval, and they got sued. We got sued, LAFCO got sued by the then owner of Suddenlink, or Suddenlink at the time, it's one of its previous companies, and they challenged whether or not broadband services are communication services. We won every battle. We won at the trial court, we won at the appellate court, but we lost the war in the sense that the appetite and desire to provide those services dissipated over time. And so the district never engaged in those services, and our approval from LAFCO expired, if you will. So we know that when we go to LAFCO, one of the things that LAFCO will require in order to approve us to provide these broadband services is we have to provide a business plan. Okay, we're going to have to show a viable business plan, which means we have to have settled on a model. We have to have a business plan that shows how we will operate and be able to make that utility or that service sustainable. You heard tonight with Mr. Salmon's presentation that as a utility district, our utilities have to be self-sustaining. Our water utility can't subsidize our electric operations and vice versa. They have to be independent. So if we were to add a third service, a communication service, that too would have to be self-sustaining eventually. We're allowed to spend some money to explore other services that we might want to provide. So hiring a consultant to investigate this further, certainly within our third authority. And we think that with a viable business plan, at least I think, we would likely garner support from LAFCO once again. However, we've been there once, and it was a very long, expensive battle to get through the court process. And so the point of this comment is, while there's lots of unknowns, it is known that we will eventually, if there's an appetite for the district to pursue some model to enhance services locally, that we will have to get LAFCO approval, and we'll have to have a business plan. So while there may be an intermediate step of a consultant to look at various options for business models, tell us what might be viable, maybe do community outreach to see what type of appetite there is for community support, we might look at this as a multi-stage process that while there is apparently demand presently, the timing to get from we have a desire to provide service to let's flip the switch and provide service could take some time. So while I appreciate some of the timelines that some of the other communities that you looked at, what it took to build out their services, I don't know whether or not they had regulatory hurdles and whether or not those were times just to build facilities or go through an evaluation and approval process. So, if we look at the endpoint, right, we want to provide service, we have to build infrastructure, we have to have funding, we have to have regulatory approval from LAFCO, we need a business plan, we need to evaluate different models. That might help provide somewhat of a roadmap of how we get from here to where you all want to be, or where you all want to take us.
Steve, the first thing that that I can see what you just talked about is a business plan.
The what?
Is a business plan.
Yes.
That's the initial point.
You have to decide which business model you want to pursue to then develop that plan. So you might have to have we might need to have a better, deeper understanding of what these various models really entail.
Yeah, I had forgotten about LAFCO until you.
It's bad memory.
And I go, oh. And then the business plan right now is the next step.
Well,
And
Wayne,
the
I think the models, I think, is the next,
Yeah.
well,
Working on the business plan, you're gonna be working on the models.
right. Yeah, chicken and the egg. But we know we're going to need a business plan, obviously, for ourselves as well as for LAFCO. We can't move forward with anything without a plan.
And that's where our aim is out now.
Right,
Models of the business plan. At
exactly.
this point, Steve, are you with us?
I'm with you.
Okay.
Again, I appreciate the committee has done a tremendously effective job of packaging where we're at,
Yeah.
our options, what resources are out there, and I think this is probably the most productive discussion we've had on this topic in a long time as an agency, so thank you for that. And as Council Gross pointed out, there are some other hurdles. We have been working with LAFCO just on some other short-term, temporary approvals with the school district and things of that. So I think LAFCO's aware of what's the challenges are here regionally. But as Council Gross has pointed out, there's a process there. I think from what I'm hearing from the board, from the committee, if it's the board's pleasure or approval, we could reconvene with the committee on setting up with the funds available for our board initiatives to set the framework up for board approval on a scoping study, because before a kind of a business plan could be set up, we need to really understand what's the most beneficial model, utilization of our resources, kind of strengths and weaknesses of each of these models and which one we want to pursue. To Director Harris's point, we don't want to get too analytical and get so far in the weeds that we're splitting hairs between things. And I think one of the things this committee's demonstrated is there is the opportunity for expediency in accessing information, getting it quickly, and acting on it. So I appreciate that as well. So if it's the board's, with board's, guidance and approval, I think the next step, definitely keeping the committee engaged here, because I think they need to be involved in the development and review and approval of the scoping study, the consultants, and things of that nature. But we can act on those kind of things relatively quickly and be prepared that when our LAFCO submittals come up, that we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed.
Yes. That's exactly where I am. Except that I do want to stress, we went from item number 1, suggested next steps, straight to 3. In the middle there was encourage Truckee residents and business participation in the upcoming Nevada County broadband. I think that's extremely important. I know that we all have had our own experiences and we've got anecdotal information on Facebook, et cetera. Nonetheless, it's just anecdotal information. And sometimes the hard facts aren't what we thought they were. So I do think that's really important moving forward to have that real data. Because weirdly enough, I have people come in and tell me about their excellent broadband at the poorhouse. It's weird, but they do. Like, I don't know what the big fuss is about. Mine is great. I'm like, really? But so I think it does behoove us to have our data clean. And that's it. That's what I would say. And I think that you summed up how I'm feeling pretty well, what I think our next steps is. I want to just double check that with the rest of the board. And, because I think we could talk all night. But I don't think anybody else would like to do that, but maybe me. So do we feel comfortable with direction to staff to explore possibilities for funding and hiring a consultant to help us parse these business models? Okay, I see nods.
Yeah. I had one question for Steve Gross. Are there different levels of LAFCO involvement based on the different business models being reviewed?
It's a good question, Director. I think the answer is no. I think at the end of the day, LAFCO has to provide its approval for the district to provide communication services as we define them in a business plan and proposal submitted to LAFCO.
Okay.
And for the record, when I responded to Director Aguirre before and said, yeah, LAFCO, we want to forget about that, I want to just clarify. LAFCO was wonderful to work with. It was the getting sued part that was no fun, and the delays and the process, but LAFCO was truly wonderful to work with, and they were very, very diligent in working with the district, so.
Right, so the only reason I bring that up is if we're going to go down the road of looking at a study, should we also include the different levels of LAFCO involvement or approvals? But if you feel it's pretty universal across the board, that we just have to accept that that's what's going to be needed, then we'll just leave it at that. And
I believe that's the case, but, depending on how far we progress, it certainly wouldn't be out of line or out of ordinary to have a conversation with LAFCO, for staff to have a conversation and just sort of touch base and say, hypothetically, if we were to, what would your involvement be? Would it be about the same?
I think it's important because it can cause delays and more work than we would anticipate, so.
Yeah, I think it's important to note and to echo Council Gross's comments. LAFCO has been actually very supportive. We worked with them hand in hand during the onset of the pandemic to have temporary emergency authority for the school district projects and things like that, potential COVID vaccination facilities, the telehealth opportunities with the airport, the town, and the hospital. So they were supportive in all those, and we've been working with them. So I think from an awareness and support perspective, LAFCO's on board with us, but we do need to do our due diligence here.
Okay.
And one comment I would want to address, as you said, I did follow what went on with LAFCO so many years ago, and being sued by Seabridge, Suddenlink, Altus, whatever they were then. But I think the other thing to consider as you evaluate these different business models is the reason that cable conglomerates generally sue public utilities or community broadband initiatives throughout the country. And it's a common practice is they see them as a competitor. And I think the proposal that the PUD put forward back around 2000 was to fill in where they felt the cable company was falling short, they felt threatened, and they sued us. They sued the public utility because they didn't want to be competing head-to-head when they felt they could provide that service to the community. I think 20 years later, we've proven they haven't provided that service to the community. But I also think that if you look at the different business models, very little of what we recommend talks about going head-to-head competing with the incumbents. We want to provide something where we could say to the cable company, we want you to use our services. We want to provide something that you and people like Oasis can use. We want to provide a facility for the community, not something that's going to put anybody out of business. And hopefully that will quell that particular need, although we'll see, certainly.
No, that's why I asked the question, because there are some very partnership-based proposals that you guys brought forward, so that's why I want to know if there is a difference at the LAFCO level based on that versus us being an ISP versus us leasing our fiber to somebody, so.
So this is a question maybe for the director. I don't know if it's on. Yeah, it's on. Director or council, which is, it would be helpful for us in the committee to get whatever information you had from LAFCO for the emergency approval for the communication services that you were allowed to do. In other words, it'd be helpful for us to know the framework and like what kind of things they have already approved, and if we can learn anything from that experience.
The approval for LAFCO during the COVID pandemic was an emergency temporary request to provide wireless services for underserved students who couldn't access remote education. And so it was a very definitive, it was a short-term decision that LAFCO provided us basically a blessing on. We didn't go through a formal presentation of a business plan or anything of that nature. It was an emergency approval with a very finite term.
Hey, Steve, what is the name of the person in charge of LAFCO in Nevada City?
LAFCO's executive officer is S.R. Jones.
Okay, yeah. She's still there then?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, I think we're pretty good with direction to staff, with the board's feedback, where we feel like we can go. We will be careful, we won't be reckless, we will be measured, and we'll hopefully get it done. So, are we good? Thank you again, everybody, for your time and your contributions this evening and helping us to parse all the details of it's a pretty big bite and need. And I think we're on our way to helping address this problem that our community is trying to solve. So thank you.
That was a pretty good workshop.
It was a pretty good workshop. It was a really good workshop. Okay, where am I? I've lost myself. Done. Okay. Sorry, now I'm in the middle. Okay, so that brings us to routine business. We're on the home stretch here, and you all don't have to hang out if you don't want to listen to our minutes and our treasurer's report. We do thank you very, very much. Yeah, exactly. I'll give you that. So, we are looking now, item number 15, to approve the treasurer's report. Good night. Great. For March 2022. Fund balances and disbursements. Do we have a motion?
Well, let's make a motion for that, pass that.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
The record will note that Vice President Bender is absent.
Thank you. And finally, item number 16, approval of the minutes of February 2nd, 2022 and February 16th, 2022.
We're gonna pay the bills first?
We did. We just did. Yeah, we're smushing them together now.
Joe, you were so efficient, you did it without knowing it.
You did it, exactly. You did it.
I thought we did fund balances.
We did all of it. We did it all in one burst.
Oh, good boy.
So minutes. Do we have a motion? Do we have a?
Any public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. I didn't take that on, I'm going to go backtrack. Do we have any public comment on the treasurer's report?
No, Madam President, we do not have any public comment on routine business.
And do we have any public comment on the minutes?
No, Madam President.
Thank you. I always want to rush at the end, and I leave the public out, and that's a shame. So back to approval. Do we have a motion, or?
I channeled my inner Ron Hemmig on this one and found a couple of, the dates were, say, 2021, so that should be 2022. And then there was a couple of motions that said it was passed 5-0 by roll call vote, but it said Director Laliotis and Harris were absent. So I don't know if that just needs to be changed to 3-0 as opposed to 5-0.
Yes, Madam.
So there were a couple of those.
So perhaps as amended by Director Harris? Now, can we entertain a motion? I will make a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Director Harris.
You You need a second?
I do.
Okay, I'll second.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Director Aguirre?
Aye.
Director Harris?
Yes.
Director Laliotis?
Yes.
President Finn?
Yes.
The minutes will note that Vice President Bitter was absent.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of another regular meeting of the Truckee Downer PUD. And I'm going to adjourn. Let's adjourn. Thank you so much, everybody, for your contributions this evening.